If you've either listened to or experienced live performances by Midwest area bands including Stillwater, Waterloo, Magnolia Summer, Rough Shop, and Cave States, you've heard music by Chris Grabau. Chris has composed songs and provided guitar work and vocals for all those groups, and his band Cave States is now in its 10th year of recording and performing. There's also a long list of bands that he's shared the stage with and also lent his musical talents to in the studio. He's appeared with bands at several well-known Midwest music festivals and also in Austin at South by Southwest. The list is quite long, but Chris has performed over the years with the likes of Chuck Prophet, Alejandro Escovedo, Robin Hitchcock, Buddy Guy, Matthew Sweet, Jeff Tweedy, and even St. Louis legend Chuck Berry. That's just a fraction of the artists and bands that have recognized the talents of the prolific Chris Grabau. Chris took time out of a very busy schedule to talk with me in the Frets studio. You're listening to Frets with DJ Fey. No lessons, no technique info. I just talk to people who play guitar. Stay tuned. Chris, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks a lot, Dave. It's a pleasure to be here. I don't get to talk to about myself too often, so...
I guess about half of the Frets guests have actually recorded an episode here in the Frets studio, which is basically a modified room in my basement, surrounded by records and posters and collectibles and a handful of guitars. But it is what it is. It serves the purpose.
I love it. Yeah. It's kind of nice to see a bunch of the collectibles, especially...
Well, I've heard the name Chris Grabau come up many, many times over the years, and I've talked before on the show about how cool it is that so many area musicians and bands have collaborated with each other in one form or another. Mm-hmm. John Horton, Kip Louie, Brian Henneman, Mark Chechik. When I go back and look at all the bands and projects you've been in, it's really something and quite a musical resume. I want to get into that subject, but I always like to go back to the early years and talk about what music you liked when you were young.
Yeah. St. Louis is, I think you're finding with this podcast, it's a big, small town. And,
it is.
And everybody is kind of interconnected in a pretty wonderful way. Let me see. You're asking like when I was young, like the kind of music?
Yeah, when you first remember kind of getting into music. And what was that?
I mean, music was around since I can remember as a kid. My parents had music in the house playing all the time, a lot of AM radio. We had a piano in the house, and I remember my mom playing piano. My dad played a little folk guitar here and there as well. I remember, coming home from soccer, and he would be noodling on the guitar quite a bit. He found a lot of joy in that. So music was always something that was kind of present. But there were there were a few different significant pivot points, I think, that really had a big impact. I remember my dad got a stereo when I was in grade school, and it was a pretty big deal. It was like a record player, the consoles and massive stereos with the speakers that are as big as, they took up a large part of the room. But it was an exciting thing, and he was building it, and I got to stay up late. And when he hooked it up, he put on a Bob Dylan record, and that was pretty mind blowing. Honestly, he played it was Tangled Up in Blue, and nice. And that was kind of a thing we got to share together. I remember just kind of really being blown away by that. But I was just a kid in the 80s. I liked a lot of music that was on the radio, but I had another thing was I had these older punk rock neighbors, who I remember they gave me a cassette of a lot of punk and new wave bands. I think they might have been tired of me playing Van Halen or something. Yeah. So they, I remember that cassette had like the Violent Femmes, I think, was a big deal. The ones that stuck out for sure were absolutely the Clash, and then I got really heavily into the Clash from that tape. Some new wave things too. REM was a big deal. Through that tape I remember that just stuck out. Yeah, those two. I think maybe I think even the Police around that time, like their first couple of records.
Yeah, it was a good period for that.
Yeah, so that was another big deal. And then the other thing is that kind of had a big influence on me. And around that time, I moved. I was born in Omaha, and I moved to Joplin, Missouri. Around that time, I got that tape, and I found a friend group who had the same kind of music interests I did, which was basically that kind of new wave punk rock stuff. And I think being in the Southwest of Missouri and being someone who's into that stuff, you tend to find your group, your friend group.
Yeah.
So we kind of all shared our excitement of music through that. But at the same time, there was a lot more country music playing around, and I heard a lot of country music on the radios and part-time jobs that I worked. And I worked I delivered refrigerators at one point, and the guy I drove with, he always played a lot of country, like Fair and Young.
Nice.
That kind of stuff. So I really ended up loving that as well. At the same time, growing this affinity for a lot of alternative rock.
Did you play other instruments besides guitar, or was it mainly guitar?
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. So I mentioned my parents played music. I really didn't jump into playing music until around that time I moved to Joplin. I was kind of noodling around, but I picked up a guitar in earnest about that time because a lot of my friends were playing music at that time, and so it was just a thing to do, and so I remember. So the guitar was the only real instrument I kind of took up in some sort of serious way, and dove right in. I bought a guitar from the one music store that was in that town, Massey Music. And I said, I'd like an electric guitar. And literally the guy just takes the first thing off the shelf and he hands it to me, and, it's right-handed. And I didn't even really realize there was left. I'm a lefty. So I didn't know that there were left-handed guitars. I just picked it up and said, okay, well, fine. And that's the one I learned from.
I mentioned earlier the very long list of bands and projects you've been a vital part of, but what was the first band you either joined or initiated or formed?
When I was growing up, I played, like I mentioned with those group of friends, we played in little bands here and there, and I played live at parties and stuff. But it wasn't until I moved to St. Louis and that I had my first real band, I think, and that was a band called Stillwater, which was basically myself and Michael Rose and John O'Brien. We were a three-piece, and we were all in college, and kind of saw it as a bit of a fun thing to do and a bit of a lark, but ended up really doing some fun things as a result, and toured around a lot, played around a lot, put a couple of recordings out there. I think the best recording, we have some really awful recordings, frankly. I mean, it was pre-digital, so to get a good recording was a feat in of itself. Now it's not a big deal. But I think our best recording is an EP called State Line, and that ended up being on, songs from that record ended up being on a bunch of compilations and got some major label interest. And it was a really fun time, really good. I love those guys. I'm still lucky enough to be friends and keep in touch.
Were you the one doing most of the writing back then?
Yeah, I did. I was writing, and actually that's kind of what sparked the idea of looking for people to play with. I had a bunch of songs, and I was just looking for, well, maybe I can find some people here like I did back home. And the drummer, Mike, he put up an ad, it was on a corkboard, with the little tabs and stuff. And I kind of misread it. I thought it was a violin player looking for somebody, but it was him looking for a band. Anyways, I really totally misread it, but it seemed to all work out.
Looking to buy a guitar, an amp, pedals? Find great deals on all of these as well as audio and recording gear at reverb.com. You can also sell your gear through Reverb. They have great articles about music gear and bands. And Reverb believes music makes the world a better place. That's why they created Reverb Gives, that provides youth music education programs all over the world with the instruments they need to make music. Link to Reverb through Frets with DJ Fey in the show notes for this episode. Well, I remember when Undertow music came to be, or I should say, I have vague memories of that. Mark Ray was my creative director back then, and of course I was always very interested in hearing about Mark's bands and projects. You were a vital part of what I guess was officially called the Undertow Music Collective.
Yeah.
How did you get involved in that?
Oh, yeah. Actually, Mark did the artwork for Stillwater's EP.
Oh, okay.
So we were kind of friends well before, as Undertow, little before Undertow, and as it was getting off the ground. Just because, he was in a band called The Relatives, and I think we played a show or two with The Relatives, and so we were always kind of friendly and, seeing each other out. How I got involved with Undertow didn't happen until quite, a number of years later. I was, Mark and I were basically in touch sharing demos. And and I was just ending Stillwater at the time. And he was like, well, would you like to come here and record, and let's make a record. And so he brought in a lot of the Undertow folks from now Nadine to help me out and make this record, and which became the first Magnolia Summer record. And then as we were working, I ended up playing on his project, which was Waterloo. And we just kind of developed a great creative relationship, and he wanted me to participate in Undertow. And so I ended up doing a lot of the operations parts, the day-to-day kind of things. I helped put out a lot of the records. I did a lot of the logistical things needed to put the records out. So Bob Andrews did a lot of the management side. Mark was a lot of the film and creative stuff, and I just was the actual getting the records out. It was pre-iTunes, so it was a much different time. Had to work with a distributor and make sense of that whole thing.
Yeah. Somewhere in my pile of old T-shirts, I have one of the original Undertow shirts.
Oh, yeah.
Get that out.
A collector's item.
Being an art director, I always scoured album covers to see who designed the cover art, and I know Mark did some of that, as you just mentioned, but you also are a photographer and graphic designer. You did some art and posters for records and gigs as well?
Yeah. I actually, so when Mark and I met, I was in undergrad in college, and I was studying with a double major in psychology and fine and performing art. Growing up as a kid, I always took a lot of photos. I still do photography. And then also, a number of different kinds of media for art. And so that translated into doing a lot of graphic work. I've done stuff for my own, but also for I did artwork for like Kevin Buckley's band, Grace Basement.
Oh yeah,
I did a lot of layout and design for that. A few other great bands from this area. Mayday Orchestra, I think, is one that I think I did something there. I did some of Rough Shop stuff, some layout, some of the Undertow bands as well. I would help out with that. Mark was the principal creative for any Undertow stuff. So your t-shirt is more than likely one of his things.
Kind of remember that, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he's my stuff is a lot more primitive than that.
So after Stillwater, Waterloo, and Magnolia Summer, you also contributed your talents to various bands like Rough Shop and Finn's Motel. Wasn't Cheyenne's Social Club also on that list?
Oh, yeah. I love that band. That was a very fun, informal little thing. E.J. Fitch was in the Tree Weasels and wanted to just kind of get some people together in sort of a fun way. So it was myself and EJ and Mary Ellis Wood. And we kind of split up playing live into thirds, and we reimagined each other's songs, or we, to play as them in a more acoustic setting.
Yeah.
And so I played a lot. I played mandolin mostly with that band, but we had a number of people jump in. John Horton played. John O'Brien, who was in Stillwater, also played for a little bit. Also, Danny Catheriner was playing in that band for a bit because he and EJ were in the Tree Weasels together.
Mary Ellis Wood on fiddle.
Yeah. That was a really fun time. It was one of those things where EJ just brought such a nice. There was just a joy about being together and playing live and not knowing exactly how it was gonna all work out. I think at one show we had Bunny Grunt join us at a show at Old Cicero's, and it was just a blast. It was a fun little project. It was fun. I still play with some bands. You mentioned Rough Shop. I play with them once a year with their Christmas shows, which are really an absolute gift to get to participate in. They have a great, collection of work, but they also have these Christmas albums that have become staples of for my family and for anybody who's heard them. They're pretty amazing. So it's fun to play them every time that year.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Take a look at this. I don't see much I'd miss. And now is not a minute too soon. When you hear that OV8 start to growl and vibrate, you better shift your weight and give me room. It don't take much to see.
Multi-instrumentalist John Horton has played guitar with many bands in the Midwest. He became an integral part of the Bottle Rockets and is currently with Sunvolt on lead guitar.
It was really about that time that I started to really discover and become a student of primarily older country music, but also a lot of other things too. R&B from 60s and 70s, blues, jazz, I guess largely what you could kind of call roots music, like older pop music, 30s swing music, big band stuff, even, that's kind of on the fringes of the stuff that I was becoming a student of. I like to think I was being a student of a lot of that stuff.
You can hear my talk with the great John Horton in Season 1 of Frets.
I hope you know you better give me room.
If somebody was to look through the long list of people you've shared the stage with over the years, it's pretty extensive. Is that the right word? Extensive, I guess. Let's just say it's a very long and impressive list of people you've been on stage with.
Yeah. It's funny. I don't know how that all works out. It's kind of, I was thinking about, I always think about something that, do you know Kevin Belford?
I do know Kevin, yeah.
Yeah.
Another great artist.
Yeah, just a fantastic artist, great person. He was telling me one time, he's like, tell your, 20-year-old self you would be doing this. And I was like, yeah, that's true. I had I did not anticipate getting to do some of the things I've done over the last 30 years. I feel pretty lucky. It's also kind of weird. back to Stillwater. I mean, we ended up opening for Buddy Guy.
Wow.
And yeah, well, that sounds great, but we were not a complimentary band to that bill. Still fun. It was nice to be about 5 feet from Buddy Guy and watch him play. Magnolia Summer is the one that I did most of the, pretty higher profile kinds of shows. Played the first Lou Fest, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That was really an exciting time. Magnolia Summer. We also played with 2 of the Fair St. Louis things, which is, again, kind of a strange show, but it was a really neat thing to play under the arch.
Yeah, there's some great photos of you under the...
Yeah. That was, both of those were with the Counting Crows, of all people. We didn't quite fit, but at the same time, it was a blast.
Sure.
Come on. My son was really young at the time, and he had an all-access pass at one of those shows, and the security knew that he was my kid, and he had, maybe a half dozen cookie runs during that show. He'd go backstage, get cookies, bring them for his friends, and then come back out. So that's a pretty fun memory to kind of look over, and I'm like, what is he, while I'm playing, like, what is he doing? So he was making these cookie runs, taking full advantage of his all-access badge. I played, we also played with Magnolia Summer played like a number of South by Southwest shows, and played with Matthew Sweet and -5 and bands like that. I met Peter Buck one time. That was kind of a big deal.
It is a big deal.
For me, it was anyways. Yeah.
I'm a big Robin Hitchcock fan, and I think you performed with him, right?
Yeah, actually at one of those South by Southwest shows.
He's so great.
At Yard Dog, at one of the day parties.
Yeah.
I will say probably the best thing we did as a live band, or I did live, was go and tour the UK with Magnolia Summer. John Horton and I went with this band from Chicago called Dolly Varden.
Oh, yeah.
And we joined a band from Scotland called the Windtown Marshalls and did a tour through the UK. Basically because Magnolia Summer had a song picked up by this guy, Bob Harris. He used to host the Old Grey Whistle Test.
Oh, sure. Bob Harris.
Okay. So he was playing a song of ours quite a bit and invited us to come up and do a session in London on the BBC. So we made a tour out of that, and then got to play live on the BBC, which again is another surreal moment.
Yeah, that's great.
One thing, as we were walking in, it was also John and I were walking in with our guitars, and I look up and Mick Jones from The Clash is right there. And I was like, of course you're going to see Mick Jones. It just seems surreal.
Yeah.
He looked up at us, and I got my camera out of my pocket, and he just kind of shook his head a little bit, and I'm like, all right, that's fine. But it was still a pretty cool moment to set off the session. And Bob Harris was just the sweetest person.
It always seemed like it. Just even his short introductions to those shows.
Yeah,
he seemed like a great guy.
That I will never forget that tour. That was an outstanding experience all the way around, and to travel with such nice people who are gifted artists, and just was such a gift. It was really, really fantastic.
Nice.
Holding down the fort with no wind, boy.
If you're a podcast addict like me, you might have thought about starting your own. I'm having a lot of fun creating and sharing my podcast, Frets with DJ Fey. It seemed daunting at first, and I had no idea how to proceed after recording my first episodes. Then I discovered Buzzsprout. Buzzsprout has helped over 100,000 people, even knuckleheads like me, launch a podcast. The tools they provide make it incredibly easy to get your thing going. They'll also help you get your podcast into all the major podcasting platforms like Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, and more. You get a great-looking website, audio players to drop into other websites, analytics, and tools to promote your podcast. To get a no-risk free trial of Buzzsprout, or to find out about their low-cost monthly plan options, follow the link in today's show notes and let them know that DJ Fey sent you. Learn the ins and outs of podcasting through people who eat, drink, and breathe it. Buzzsprout, the easiest way to start a podcast. Now, back to mine. Well, I was sifting through my stacks of CDs recently and came across a couple things that I had shelved for a while and realized you appeared on those. One being the compilation Out of the Gate Again that has a Stillwater track and a Cheyenne Social Club track.
Yeah, that was that thing's a bit of a time capsule.
Yeah, it's a great compilation.
It really is. But, if you look at the credits on that, in addition to those tracks, I think there's an early Sour Patch, right, still, which became Nadine. There's a band Caution Horse, who I loved, Dave Anderson's band. Wagon was on there, which Danny Kathreiner was a part of, and Steve Runner, who became a part of Nadine. Who else?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember now. There's a pretty long list.
Yeah, it is. Grandpa's Ghost was on there.
That's right.
That's right. And they were pretty awesome. That was a really cool compilation.
And I think you played some mandolin on that Cheyenne Social Club song that appears on that compilation.
Yeah, I did. That was the main instrument I played with that band. It was a nice chance to just step away from guitar and play mandolin. I picked up mandolin when I was in Joplin. I used to drive around a lot taking photos, and I was outside of town in a semi-rural kind of town. I don't even remember what the name is. I forget which town it was, but there was a Sears lawnmower shed that had a sign that said Ray's music instruments, and I stopped off. I pulled over and walked up and met this guy, Ray Baker, who was selling instruments out of the lawnmower shed, and he was pretty just sweet man, and we got to talking, and he played bluegrass music, and I was telling him we were trying different instruments out, and I really liked playing mandolin. He was giving me a few lessons here, and he said, "You know what? If you come back and play with some bluegrass with my wife and I'll give it to you at cost." So he gave me a great deal, and I got to go, and I'd come back and play with him and his wife, and she played stand-up bass, and it was kind of a great little memory. He was a sweet man, just a neat guy. So yeah, I always, whenever I pick up the mandolin, I think of Ray.
Another album that was a tribute to Chuck Berry, Brown Eyed Handsome Man, had a Waterloo cover and a Magnolia Summer cover.
Yeah, that's a cool compilation.
That's a great one.
That's another time capsule, I think. That was Kip Louie's idea, actually. I remember he talked to me about, we used to have lunch together quite a bit. And I think he had that idea of getting St. Louis artists together to cover a bunch of Chuck Berry songs. And so he invited a number of people. And then through Undertow, we helped put it together, but we did it in collaboration with KDHX. So that was a really fun time, real creative time. I'm proud of both those tracks, the Magnolia Summer and Waterloo tracks. Hardly remember recording them, to be honest with you. I do remember playing that show though, because the launch party for that record, because I think Jay Farrar played that with Fontella Bass was there, Bottle Rockets played. It was just a pretty cool evening. And I think that was my first time I stepped foot in the pageant.
Oh, yeah.
So it was kind of a weird introduction to that place. One of the first, I guess. I don't remember exactly. But still, it was a fun evening. And that compilation's pretty great. And it was nice to support KHX through that.
Yeah, that's a nice.
Yeah, at that time, they were just really dialed into supporting local music. And it was pretty neat. Mm-hmm.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
They say there's not much left of the town, just a few old houses that are falling down.
Kip Louie has made music in his hometown of St. Louis for years. He's a co-founder of the annual music festival Twang Fest, an event that's brought music performers from all over the country to St. Louis for 24 years now. Kip has played in some great bands and has also released solo albums, often with his wife JJ on vocals, guitar, and harmonica.
And there was all this enormous complexity and these cool chord changes and like this mix of rock and roll and country and folk and blues. And that's funny because like I later came back to that, and that's kind of what I do these days myself, is, you know, roughly speaking, in that Americana vein.
My talk with Kip Louie is available in Season 2 of Frets.
Lesterville was a hard place, not much beauty, not much grace. Even so, I nearly stayed, and my departure was delayed.
Are you a coffee drinker? Peter Cohen, also known as String Bean Pete, offers the finest beans from around the world. Pete roasts in small batches in non-computerized, old-school ways to music, under a disco ball. You heard that right. Pete also plays a mean bass guitar. And he owns and operates String Bean Coffee. He offers many fine roasts and blends, including a decaf option, and now also String Bean Half Calf. Learn more about Pete's story and where to get his great coffee at stringbeancoffee.com.
Hi, this is Chris Grabau, and you are listening to Frets with DJ Fey.
Well, in recent years, actually more like the last 8 or 9 years, you've been writing and recording with your band Cave States. And I finally got to see you guys play my favorite St. Louis venue off Broadway last fall. I think it was September you guys played.
Yeah, that's my favorite venue too. They've really done something in that space, haven't they? Like,
it's a little different.
I think it sounds amazing.
Yeah, but it hasn't changed much over the years, but I know they made some kind of improvements or renovations or something recently.
The sound is, I think they've upgraded their PA, and then the stage is larger, moved the bar outside and stuff. It's become a really just great music venue to see bands, let alone
it really
play.
is, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Cave States kind of started out of a fluke as well, you know, kind of like how Magnolia Summer started with sharing some ideas. Cave States did as well. Danny and I have crossed paths. Danny Catheriner and I were crossing paths over the last 20 years. And somewhere along the way we were talking and we were like, well, let's just kind of get together and share some song ideas. And that turned out to be kind of it was a lot of fun. And so we started collaborating in earnest and making a collection of songs, and that became our first record. I think that was 2011, maybe, The Great Divide. And then we have another record called True Life, which is a few years after that. I think that's right. Get the dates all mixed up. And then we just put out our third record, you know, kind of after COVID, called Liminal.
I picked up Liminal at that show we were talking about. So
yeah, that was
great album.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really proud of that record. That record's different than the other two. The first one was mainly Danny and I sharing ideas and then kind of putting them on tape, so to speak. But Todd Snitzer became increasingly involved and definitely is the third leg of the stool of that band, if not, the one that holds it together. He's an exceptionally talented individual, and he really made the second record something I'm very, very proud of. And we took that a step further with this new one. This new one is has a lot more production nuances and a lot more overdubs, and a few more people are involved that weren't involved in the first two. So it's a definitely departure. It's an absolute departure from the first record, and I'm kind of down for it. It's neat.
Well, Adam Reichman was on the show recently, and he was singing the praises of Todd Schnitzer. Of course, he's done some work with him over the years too.
Yeah. Well, again, back to the big small town, I would cross paths with Todd, and we would play shows together back in the Stillwater / Sour Patch days. And I think I've known some of these people like Adam and Todd for 28 years, 29.
Wow.
It starts to add up,
Well, looking at all your bands and your songwriting and all the projects you've been involved in and are still involved in with your music, how do you find time to work at SLU, St. Louis University?
I don't know. I mentioned before, I kind of did a dual major, and so my day job's in educational development, and that's kind of the other half of the coin, so to speak, of what I went to school for. I don't know. I kind of see it all as a part of a whole. I mean, writing and making art is just kind of an expression of being a person and being alive, and I've been doing that since I can remember. I don't. It's just kind of what I do. I will say I think as a result, I mean, I love what I do for a job. I think they complement one another, because I think that same creative headspace applies to working for others. I mean, you have to be intentional and thoughtful, and but I do work a lot slower. I think I'm on about a 3-year clip of I still write. I try to write as much as I can, and especially when motivated. But I think 3 years seems to be my arc, so to speak, when I'm ready to do something. Mm-hmm.
Any new projects in the works or on the horizon, or do you need a couple more years for that?
I might need a couple more years for that. I'm not sure. I mean, I've been collaborating with some friends, some other people here and there over the last few years. Some of that came out of COVID with some remote collaboration kind of things. I think also technology allows you to collaborate in some real deliberate, cool ways and not be in the same room. So that's been kind of fun to see and experience. I'm not exactly sure if we'll have another Cave States record or not. We'll have to see. But either way, I'll just kind of keep going.
Chris Grabau, you're very appreciated and respected in the music world, and I'm really, really glad that you and I finally got to catch up and talk.
That's really, really kind of you to say. Thank you so much. And it's a pleasure. It was a pleasure to be here. Thanks.
We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Dave.
Don't take long enough to find lonely one still up at night, looking for a hand from time to time.
for listening to Frets with DJ Fey. If you like the show, you can follow or subscribe for free at most podcast platforms. Hope you'll join me again next time. Stay tuned.